Hello guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I will show you how you can start your own garden anywhere you live in. And basically you don't need a lot of space, you just need the right materials so you can start your own garden. So I'm going to give you 5 of the most important tips you need in order for you to grow your own garden. So let's get started. So the tip number 1 is the space you have. Many of you might have like a land or acres of land where you can build raised beds, or you can actually start your garden in the ground, and that is great. You can build raised beds like the one that I have here. You can build many of them if you have the space, or you can just work the soil and tilt it and add some organic stuff in it, manure or compost, and you can start in-ground gardening as well. And some of you might live in a house just like I do and have a nice backyard where you can start your gardening, which I did. I built this raised bed for my tomato and peppers and some other vegetables that I'm planning on grow this year. And then I also built some planters to grow my fruit trees, and I did plant some of them in the ground. I do have clayish soil, so I did work this part for many years before I planted. I worked this piece for 2 years with good organic matter, and then it helped the 12 inches, the top 12 inches, to be very good soil. It's crumbly and it's a very nice texture where the fruits are going to grow really good. And then once they hit that native soil, they'll be fine. And I also started with planters, as you can see, so that I can manage the soil that they're growing in, especially for the citrus trees, that they like a very good drainage soil. And if you live in an apartment, or you don't have a lot of space in your backyard, or you only have a balcony, you can surely start your own gardening by planting your vegetables or your flowers in containers. You don't necessarily have to have a raised bed or plant them in the ground. You can definitely start them by containers. You can buy containers this big, or buckets that are plastic, that the plastic is the kind of plastic that you can put food in it, and then just drill some holes in the bottom and use this to grow vegetables, to grow flowers, anything you want. And you don't need a lot of space for the containers. Or you can also have these kind of containers that are fabric containers, and you can order these on Amazon. I got these containers, I think they were like $15 or $19 for 15 of these, and these are 5-gallon containers, which are really good. They're this fabric that the plant can breathe through it, and the water drainage is really good on those. And then tip number 2 is sun. Sun is one of the most important things that the plant needs, especially if it's fruits or vegetables. They need minimum of 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. So you have to place your plant in a place where they're going to receive a lot of sun. As you can see right now here in Houston, Texas, it's 2 p.m. and every single plant is getting sun. Since the sun comes out until 2 or 3, everything is getting touched by the sun. And around 4 or 5, a lot of these plants are starting to get shade, which is good, because that way you can give them a little rest of the sun that they have received all day long. Sometimes your plant might the leaves might curl up or something, like, or they might look like they're tired of receiving too much sun. So an afternoon shade will be okay for your plants, as long as they receive direct sunlight throughout the whole morning and mid-afternoon day. That leads us to tip number 3. Number 3 is watering. It's very important for you to check your plants every morning to see how they're doing with water. Sometimes the top 2 inches might be a little dry, but if you stick your finger deep in, you might feel that it's still moist, so that'll be okay. It'll be okay if you water a little bit, so that the top inches get wet. That way it'll keep the soil moist, but you don't have to. Some plants prefer to dry out before they get watered again, and most of them are the citrus plants. They don't like to have their feet wet, so just let them dry, not completely, but before they do, give them a little bit of water and let that water drain out completely before you water again. There are some plants that they are okay if their feet are a little moist, but don't over drown your plants, because then they will die. Usually containers, you have to check for the water constantly, because since they're in containers, it is more likely that they're going to dry out faster than if they're in the ground. So just keep that in mind. And for example, my ground plants, I usually water them probably twice a week, depending on how hot it gets. And then my containers, I do check them daily. Once it starts getting hotter and or drier, or there's a lot of wind, it tends to dry the soil faster, so you have to keep an eye on that. And for my raised beds, I do treat them like if they're in the ground as well, so I water them twice, maybe 3 times a week, depending on how hot it gets. And then tip number 4 would be fertilizing. Fertilizing, it's very important for your plants. Just like us, they need to be fed with the appropriate fertilizer. That depends on how you want it. You can either use an organic fertilizer or you can use a synthetic fertilizer. One of the main and big brands for synthetic fertilizer is Miracle-Gro. You can use that. It just depends on each person how they want to grow their plants, and a lot of people have different kind of point of views on whether organic or is better than synthetic, or if your plants prefer organic. A lot of people might say that plants cannot distinguish between the difference, and they'll just suck up all of the nutrients that they need, either if it's organic or synthetic fertilizer. And one of the brands that I use is Espoma organic fertilizer, and I do have a specific fertilizer for each plant. Just every package has its own directions and how often you should apply fertilizer to your plants. Just follow those instructions, and depending if it's on ground or container, they have a different kind of amount of food that they need. And you can also get some water soluble fertilizers and feed them with the water soluble fertilizers every week. I do that. And then the granulated fertilizers, I do add them every month or every 1 or 3 months, depending on how much they need it. There are some plants that are heavy feeders, so it's very important for you to feed them the appropriate time, so that way they can get the nutrition that they need and they can grow properly. So basically all of my fruit plants, here in Houston, I add granulated fertilizer in January, end of January, and then I'll fertilize them again with that granulated fertilizer in May or June, and then the last application would be in August or September, and that's all they get with the granulated fertilizer. And then with the liquid fertilizer, I'll feed them every 1 or every 2 weeks. That way they can get instant fertilizer in the soil. And yes, that's basically it. That's the tips that I used for starting my own garden. When I started my own garden, it was just this little piece. It was a 4x6, and I only had a few tomato and peppers in there. And then each year I started adding more and more and more and more until I got to this. It's not big, it's not the best garden, but it works for me. And you can build your own garden however you want to. You can use any fertilizer that you want. The important is that you feed your plants, you water them, and they get the amount of sun that they need. And I have not taken over this part of the backyard because we're planning on making a small little pool or something here. If not, trust me, this whole garden would be covered with fruit plants and vegetables and all sorts of things. But yes, this is my small little backyard garden that I have. And if you follow those tips, you will have a successful garden. And this is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.